Think of all the City Skylines YouTube series you've seen, and all the different things that set them apart from one another. We've seen cities set in the distant past, and in the far future. We've seen fanciful cities set on other worlds, and one-to-one recreations of real-life locations here on Earth. There's a huge diversity of content out there, but to me, there's always been something conspicuously absent. One thing that almost none of these series has ever addressed. Something that has shaped countless cities for centuries, but which we don't see simulated in cities at all, nor planned for the sequel. Race. Hello, I'm James, or James of James here on YouTube, the Steam Workshop, and elsewhere online. I'm a City Skylines creator and have a bachelor's degree in American history. In this new series of South Windsor, I'm going to combine these interests to explore the ways race has shaped the history of my home state. Growing up in Virginia, I would often return to the small towns of Appalachia where my parents were raised. They would tell me stories from their childhood as we drove, usually some fond memory or youthful mischief. But then, echoes of the segregated Jim Crow South would intrude upon their nostalgia, and I'd watch their faces turn serious and sorrowful. As I considered these stories, and the world in which my parents grew up, it mystified me how this society, only a few short decades prior to my own time, had such pervasive and institutionalized racial restrictions. It seemed bizarre. My young mind struggled to understand. What was segregated? Why and how? Who could do what work? Who could hold public office, run a business, or be a customer? How did your experience of daily life differ if you were white or black, male or female, young or old, urban or rural, rich or poor? Most of all, I wondered, who decided all these things, and why? In the decades since, even after my studies through college and beyond, as much as I've learned the historical facts of segregation, as many causes and effects as I've examined, I've still never felt like I truly understand the answers to these questions. There's a visceral way in which the Jim Crow South just doesn't make sense to me. The minute ways segregation infused everyday life still eludes my imagination and my understanding. Perhaps these aspects of history simply are incomprehensible to those who didn't experience that particular time and place firsthand. However, perhaps we can better understand the past and satisfy this curiosity using City Skylines as a tool to help us visualize the answers. We have some precedent for playing the game this way after all. Other YouTubers have explored big cities as they grow through their history. Do Not Eat's Franklin, Ackrowis's Altengrad, Besquicklehausen and Interurban Era's Presidio Bay. I've always wanted to create something in a similar vein, but with a new focus. After all, what about the small towns, farming communities, and rural areas that support those cities? What's the story there? And sure, it's common for YouTubers to talk about the population or the institutions of their cities, perhaps even dream up the city's movers and shakers as unique characters. However, we rarely hear about the cultures and communities that shape the neighborhoods of these cities, and I've never heard mention of racial tension, oppression, or violence. Ignoring these realities leaves us with false impressions that remain with us when we look away from our screens and out into the world around us. The elements missing from these imaginary cities can only give an unsatisfying and incomplete understanding of the communities of real people as they are today, and as they have been. Thus, in this series, we'll be focusing on the semi-fictional small town of South Windsor, situated in the Piedmont region of Virginia. We'll watch how the landscape and built environment changes through time, beginning in the centuries before European colonization, through the modern day, and, perhaps, even into the future. The mid-20th century will be our main focus, and together, we'll help each other understand how the racial dynamics of society impacted historical events and the built environment. I plan to post at least one video each month, with the first video coming before the end of August.
October 2024.
This introduction will focus on two main topics: the real-world setting the series will be based upon, and the lifeways of the region's indigenous inhabitants prior to European settlement. Following that video, we'll explore the region's colonial history, moving through white settlement and native displacement, the Revolution, Virginia's 19th century agricultural society, and the Civil War, arriving in the 20th century by episode 4. If this sounds interesting to you, I hope you'll keep an eye out for videos to come and let others know who might enjoy the project. Thanks for taking the time with me today. This is James of James signing off, and I'll see you in South Windsor later this month.